You're listening to the Crowdfunding Nerds Podcast, a podcast that will help you succeed before, during, and after your crowdfunding event. And now, here is your host, Andrew Lowen.
Hey everybody, welcome to Crowdfunding Nerds. I am your host, Andrew Lowen. This is a podcast about crowdfunding stuff on Kickstarter. I am joined as always by my SEO marketing wizard, Rick, and sexy Irish Sean. And today, it's kind of a special episode because Sean has been working at Next Level Web, which is our marketing agency's name, for 3 months now. And he came in before with some marketing experience, but ever since he began his work at Next Level Web, it's been exclusively, writing articles and doing Kickstarter marketing for our clients. And so this podcast episode is all about Sean.
Aw.
And Rick is the third wheel. What's up, nerds?
Are you guys punishing me for for me messing up last podcast?
Yes.
Well, actually, I have an SEO question.
Oh boy. I'm excited.
My question is this. Do you rank better on Google if you have Google Analytics and Google display ads on your website?
Ooh, that's a very highly debated question. Especially some people think they get kickbacks when they have ads or use analytics. What's great about analytics, though, I think analytics slightly does help you, even though Google will admittedly say no. But however, though, having analytics code on your website, Google checks it out. And when people go to your site, it goes to Google. So when you have new pages posted or you have more, a lot of traffic on your site, it goes to Google and Google knows. And so I think that does help your rating.
Okay. Because I figured there would be financial incentive, especially if you had like display ads, right? Because if you had display ads, Google has incentive to rank your website higher so that, when people go to your site, there's a greater possibility of getting clicks on those ads and then making money.
True. But Google will say no on that because, I think there's some legal issues on that too. It's sort of, paying the right hand and then having the left hand help out or something like that. But like I said, when it comes to having analytics, though, on your site, I think it does help. But Google will say officially, they say no.
Okay. And are there any alternatives to Google Analytics that are really popular, but maybe people don't know about?
There's just nothing out there that is extremely, that is free and as robust. But I guess there are some alternatives.
There's some smaller companies out there, boutique companies that you can pay and they put their code on. And some claim that they have better statistics than Google, and they might. I haven't personally tried them. However, it also depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Are you just using analytics to see what keywords you rank for? If that's the case, then there's actually some other tools like Ahrefs that you can use for keyword analytics and things like that. Or if you're just checking to see where your traffic comes from. I mean, it really depends on what your final goal is. Analytics is great to see traffic and to see if your search engine optimization is working. However, they don't spill the beans. They don't give you the details on what keywords people are coming in on and things like that. Sometimes it does, but it's very vague. And most of the time it just says organic traffic and nothing. There's no other data to support that. So using other tools for SEO purposes is definitely required if you're keeping track of what keywords are working and how people are coming in.
And would analytics slow your website down?
Not the new stuff. The new stuff's pretty good. It's a very small code snippet. It doesn't pull as much as it used to. I do recommend that you do my mind's going blank right now.
It's basically what HTML5 stuff does.
Yeah, so it gets loaded at the...
lets your website display
end.
Before all the things are loaded.
Yeah, you have it load after everything else is loaded. I can't remember what it's called.
One thing I'll say on this topic is something that our listeners can do in relation to SEO, because a lot of people want to know what their website is, what's happening. Is it increasing in ranking? What am I ranking for? And that sort of thing. You can go to ahrefs.com. That's Apple, Henry, I don't know what. I've never been in the military. I have no idea how to do this. But ahrefs.com. I couldn't even think of something that began with the letter R. It's a great website, though, and much better than my ability to think of something that begins with the letter R. And it will help you It will find all of the keywords that your website ranks for. It will tell you the positioning of those keywords, and it's going to ask you to pay, but just start a free trial and then cancel. It'll give you, after 7 days, I think it's like $7 for a 7-day trial. So you pay $7, get that 7-day trial, elect not to upgrade, and you will get a free lifetime account with them. It won't show you as robust of data as if you were paying in, their higher plans, but it's actually pretty useful. It tells you generally how your website's ranking. It tells you what keywords you rank for and generally what position it found your website ranking for that keyword, which can be pretty useful for those that want to know.
We are in no way sponsored or endorsed by Ahrefs. Ahrefs actually has a special link for keyword rank checking. So if you go to ahrefs.com/keyword-rank-checker, you can actually type in your keyword and domain and check it without even having signed in. So there you go.
Wow.
Nice.
The wizard strikes again.
The wizard has spoken. All be silent.
All right, enough about SEO Wizard Richard. I think we need to focus on our sexy Irish Sean.
Sexy Irish Sean.
I was watching a YouTube video about this guy. He's in the UK, and his accent was very similar to yours. So I'm assuming you're a UK offshoot.
Brothers.
Brothers.
It's a pretty small place. Probably related.
Do they just have like one pub? Is that how small Ireland is? Like everyone just goes to the same pub?
Oh no, like you'd have like a tiny town. There'd be like 7 pubs.
That's awesome.
Population 7, but we have 7 pubs.
That's where the gangs like spawn from. There's at least one Irish gang per pub, which is what I learned from the movie Snatch.
Wait, they have movies about Ireland?
Yeah, The Field.
The Field of Dreams? Is that the one?
No, it's just The Field.
Oh.
If you build it, they'll come. I don't know. Sorry. Is this disrespectful? Don't answer that. All right, let's move on to Sean. So, I mean, if you want to start us off, just, that you kind of have the premise, what you've learned since joining the last 3 months, and let's just kind of take it from there and see where it goes.
There's quite a lot. And I suppose I want to try to focus it on how this information can help people with their Kickstarter projects and campaigns, and what I've learned and what I think would help them. One thing that sort of jumped out straight away was this idea of managing people's expectations. It's very tempting that when people are excited about their board game project or their Kickstarter project and they want to just throw a bunch of money at their Facebook ads, and it does take some time for your Facebook ads to actually start to work, and it takes a lot of fiddling and tweaking. And I suppose one of the advantages of me living in Ireland is that when I get up at 9 o'clock in the morning to sit down and look at people's ads who are mostly based in America, that's 1 o'clock Pacific time. So I get these really good readings of data basically at the very end of the day in America. So I'm able to make some really good decisions after seeing like really clear data at the end of the day. So it takes a lot of tweaking before your ads actually to start generating some results. And that's one thing that I've had to learn to sort of teach people, is that your ads, they're going to take some time and a bit of financial investment for them to really take off, and not to get discouraged by the sort of the amount of money you have to invest in the beginning. That might make you a bit scared, but if you just stick with it, they do. By the time you actually launch for Kickstarter, they're usually blowing up by that stage.
Like when we start an ad, sometimes we hit it right on the money, and we get ads that cost $1.50 per email or less. Even those ads that perform very well need to accumulate social proof on them. And if something is brand new and has no likes, comments, or shares versus an ad that has, let's say, a combined total of 20 or 25 likes, comments, shares, reactions on that ad, it's gonna just perform better. It's also possible that we do A/B testing, so we'll test one image against another or one style of text against another, and it's possible that we approach the ads in a way that is not effective early on, and we need to kind of test and make sure it works. So as far as, how your topic of managing client expectations, you want to speak a little bit more, like, how would you talk to a client, and what is really important to let them know, and what is the danger of improperly managing expectations in that realm?
A lot of clients, when they see that their ads aren't doing very well, the natural inclination is to suggest certain things, and usually they're things we've considered, but sometimes it's helpful. It's also, I'm not saying, I don't want to discourage that, because I do think there's value in that. But what I always try and tell the client is that the more tweaks we do to the ad, or the more tests we do, the more expensive it becomes. And we can't really tweak ads once the ad is live. All you can really do is disable it or let it run, because if you make any tweak to the ad and republish it, you're basically removing all the data that it has collected and really wiping it clean. It's the equivalent of deleting it and creating it again. So any social proof that is there is gone. Any interactions that will actually help the Facebook algorithm rank that ad is all removed as well. So we try to be more methodical and less reactionary with our Facebook tweaking and adjustments, and try and play the long game. So that's probably one thing I try to encourage clients with, is send us all the information you can. We'd certainly consider it all, but that doesn't mean we're going to go out and start implementing it all straight away. We certainly will be taking a more methodical, slow approach to getting these ads on the right track.
Yeah, I use whatever dollar amount people invest, I tend to say right around every $60 that you put into your ads, that gives us enough information to make a meaningful move. Let's say if a client's monthly budget is $600 for ads, we would spend $20 a day, and that translates to $20 a day in ad spend. I generally have said this many times, is that, people will ask us, how often should I expect that you'll change the ads and, make tweaks and whatnot. And I generally say that, for a $20 a day budget, it's like every 3 days, you should expect us to make changes. Because if, like you said, if we put, well, actually, when it's like a new client comes in and we actually get the ad started, let's say on like a Friday evening, $20 a day in spend, maybe it only gets through like $5 or $10 in ad spend, we could have a really great result. Maybe it's like, $1.50 per email subscribe. And then Saturday rolls around, and because it has no social proof at all, it could be like $4 per email subscribe on that day. And that is a pretty dramatic difference. It's more than twice as effective if it's $1.50 versus $4. But it doesn't mean that the ad is bad. It just means that we have to let that ad accrue some social proof. And so we have to let Facebook learn who the right audience is for this particular ad. And that happens by Facebook serving your ad to some people that are great and other people that are terrible. And Facebook has to learn the difference between the two, right?
Yeah, sometimes I notice is that you'd be looking at an ad at the beginning, like 50 cents a lead. You'd be like, oh, this is great. And then you come back the next day and suddenly it's like at $3 a lead. Like, what happened that day? And you're like, well, I know that this is a good ad because it's been getting really good conversions. And then you come back the day after and it's back to like maybe 60 cents or something. So sometimes there's just days where ads don't perform particularly well, because at the end of the day, there are humans at the end of the screen. And there is sort of factors that even if the algorithm is doing its job, some people just aren't going to click on that day for whatever reason. So sometimes you do get these. And I think if you were to be very reactionary and you were to make changes constantly, you might be tweaking an ad that actually, if given some time and left alone, is actually a pretty decent ad.
As long as our clients trust us, that's really the key, isn't it? And that's why we're talking about managing expectations now, is because if a client will trust us to make good moves and the right decisions, and, really if they believe that we're paying attention to the ad and not just sleeping at the wheel or something, that kind of gives us the runway to make good moves, right? But, one other thing in regard to managing client expectations, I find, is right from the very beginning, before we even get into ads. The goal of a Facebook ad campaign for a Kickstarter, when you're in that pre-marketing stage, is to fund as quickly as possible, really. The reason they're paying money to Facebook and paying us to manage and whatnot is so that they can get funded. Like, they want to have a badge that says funded in 12 minutes or whatever, right? And sometimes that's not very realistic. Sometimes clients come in expecting the minimum funding goal they're gonna cross is like $1 million, and not figuratively, but that's sometimes the way that people think. Other people are very, on the opposite end of the coin, they're very humble about the amount they think they can raise, and we'll have to encourage them that, hey, you can fund in the first 24 hours or first 48, whatever. But we never promise that you can fund in 24 hours. We never promise that you can fund on day one. Everything that we do is always set so that that happens. That's our goal. But you want to talk about that, like how we manage client expectations on that front?
Yeah, because I think, there's so many factors which are out of our control. Each ad campaign, each project is so different, from the target audience, from the amount of people you can potentially advertise to the quality of graphics, to the theme of a particular project or game. Some of them are just easier to sell, and just that the ads are just easier to run, and some of them take a bit more work and time to really make profitable or get the ball rolling. So a lot of those factors are outside of our control. Sometimes we do the exact same thing. We have the exact same strategy, exact same approach, philosophy with very similar games, but we might get completely different outcomes. And we're not doing anything different. It's just that there's exterior factors which no one can control that impact the profitability of those ads. So that's something for everyone to keep in mind, and as you said, I think as long as people know that we are doing our best, and that I love when people say, oh, have you tried that? And I go, yep, I tried that. And this comes back to another thing that I've learned, is to think like an entrepreneur, that I'm not a person working for this company. I need to think like an entrepreneur, and if I can think like that, I can then help other entrepreneurs. I can help you, my employer. I can help the clients, because ultimately they all have the same sort of philosophy, right? It's putting input in to get output. And if you can think like that, I'm helping this person, they're paying this amount which is the input, to get a certain output. And if I can focus on how can I serve them and how can I maximize that output, then you're going to have a happy customer, happy client.
Absolutely.
So that's another thing I try to think of. How can I help this business person?
I'll tell clients we are going to figure out what the benchmark data is for your particular project, and we're going to use that to inform what future decisions we make and all of that. But before we start advertising, before we start to measure data, I can't tell you what it's going to be or what I think it's going to be. We can just apply solid processes and that kind of thing, proven processes. It's really important to let clients know there are certain things that are in our control. There are certain things that are out of our control. So let's focus on what is in our control. You can't control if your product goes viral and explodes. I think I've mentioned certain companies that have worked very hard, like Simon or Mythic Games or Roxley or, companies like that. They have built a loyal following and have the ability. I mean, they really have to have every project raise, $500,000 or more, because they have overhead and staff and all that. We focus clients on controlling what you can. You run into limits with the amount of time that you have. You could pitch 1,000 media outlets, and you could get onto every podcast possible, pitch those podcast people and whatnot, but you run into a limited amount of time. In the same way you have a limited amount of money. So it would be awesome, and you absolutely would make more money if you just put in $20,000 more into Facebook ads, or you ran Board Game Geek ads and had 10 reviewers, all the top reviewers review your game. You would get more traffic, you would raise more money, but you most people don't really have the ability to do that, and or the bandwidth to be able to manage all of that. And most Kickstarter creators are just 1 or 2 person teams just going to Kickstarter trying to realize a dream or trying to make a thing a reality. So I always tell them, you need to just focus on what you can, pray for the rest, because that's that's it. That's all you can do.
Now, earlier you did mention sometimes it can take time for ads to take off. How long would you test like an individual ad, or like how many impressions, or what would be a good case scenario for someone who's putting up an ad and doesn't know if it's successful or not?
So it really depends on the budget and how many ad sets we have and what image are we using and what am I testing it against. Sometimes it's very clear that the ad is not working. You can compare this just with the percentage of the click-through rate, the conversion rate. So sometimes it's just very obvious that this is not working and you don't have to run it for very long. But sometimes, like I said, it's a bit more nuanced and you're like, well, I'm not sure. I think on average, as Andrew said, 2 to 3 days, you can get some pretty good data. One thing I like doing is creating lookalike audiences, because once you start getting some leads, you can tell Facebook to basically find people like these people and exclude the people who've already signed up to your emails. So that's very handy because it prevents the duplication of ads of your advertisements to people who've already signed up or who have already engaged with your ad. But you're finding more people who are like these other people. And I think we've some of our on our most successful campaigns, some of the most successful ad sets have been lookalike audiences because they get stronger over time. So that's something that I try to think about as well. That's been something that I've learned, that just the importance of lookalike audiences and how to leverage them properly.
When can you start using like lookalike audiences? How long does it take? I know you do your initial ad setup and you choose your audience. You choose the your demographics. You choose things that they are interested in that you think would be the same as what you're offering. As someone who would be new to like Facebook ads, when do you start using those lookalike audiences, or how do you start using those?
I think once we've streamlined an ad and the ad is getting consistent results at a decent price, then I know, okay, we've got a demographic here that is responding well to this ad. I now want to create a lookalike audience that's going to match this particular demographic. So again, it depends from ad to project, but those are sort of the broad demographics that I keep an eye on. Sometimes we have some of our clients have had previous projects, so they might be doing an expansion to a current game, so they already have an email list, and we can actually build a lookalike audience from that email list itself, and that's very, very helpful. And that's why you kind of get the snowball effect. If you've done one Facebook campaign and then you move to your next campaign, you can sort of leverage all the investments of your first campaign into your second campaign with the use of that mailing list, especially if the game is very similar. And you can then use that to really streamline your advertising on Facebook through lookalike audiences. And I just love when a client says, oh, I've got like 500 people in this mailing list, and they're able to send it to you and you're able to upload it and basically from the beginning have an ad that's doing pretty well.
Yeah, that's actually something that I hear you talk about on a regular basis. In fact, going back to thinking like an entrepreneur, oftentimes, and I think this is great advice, you counsel clients, and I've heard this easily a half dozen times, that when you build the list, it's going to help future campaigns. So your return on investment isn't solely determined by this campaign. It's going to influence the customer's lifetime value is going to influence all of your campaigns.
And then I just have one more quick question about lookalike campaigns. Let's say you have a really good, successful lookalike campaign running. Are you able to copy that campaign to other ads, or the lookalike audience to other ads?
Yeah. Sometimes I do a lookalike audience. Okay, I want people who are like this in Canada, or people who are like this in this specific area, and then you're able to determine lookalikes based on geography. Usually within each ad set, we usually have 2 ads running, and depending on which one's doing the best, if they're both doing about the same, we sort of leave them where they are. But if one is clearly better than the other, we'll turn the one that isn't doing as well off, and then we will tweak or adjust the other one to see if we can make it even better than what it is. So all ad sets, including the lookalike we follow that procedure.
That's kind of our philosophy of the control ad. So we try to find an ad that's performing the best, and we call that our control. And then really our mission is to outperform that ad with a new ad that we create, which is called our variable. So you've got your control, which is performing the best, and the variable, which you're constantly testing something. Now, one thing, maybe it's a little related to managing customer expectations, like you're talking about. You can't drop like 30 ads. I mean, I've seen advice online about, oh yeah, I just create like 50 ads and I see which one works the best, and that really doesn't work that way, because Facebook is going to prioritize the ads that are working. More like it sends each ad out to a sample of people, and then it determines which ad will perform the best, and it's going to devote most of your budget in that ad set or the audience to that particular ad. And because it's based on a small sample size, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's actually the truth. So you don't get we take 3 days to determine, and $60 of budget to determine, what the truth is. So when Facebook, yes, it is automated, it does go after, it does have a lot of data points that it measures, but it's not right. Most of the time it's not right. So you really have to make sure that you only have 2 ads that you're measuring, the control and the variable.
And this is also known, like, in web standards as split testing as well. How much are you changing on the ad when you do this type of split testing? And also, how do you explain it to clients? Because I know sometimes clients don't quite understand when you do 2 separate ads. They're like, wait, you're spending money on 2 separate ads and one may not work as well as the other. I don't understand. How do you explain that to clients?
Well, the one thing that we would change is we would usually change one thing so that it's very clear where we're seeing like a leap in success because we changed this one thing. It might just be a word in the title. It might be a complete new title. It could be a new image. But usually you bring it down to one variable, so you can clearly say, okay, this one change that we did has made this difference, so we're gonna impact that. What I say to clients is we're just trying to make your ads as successful as possible, and if we have one that's great, we're not going to just say, okay, that's great, and sit by and do nothing. We're going to continually try and make it as good as we can until we get to a point where our changes aren't really making any difference. So we're just going to let them run and do their course. We've sort of they're at their point of optimization. We're just basically keeping an eye on them that they don't crash into a big ball of fire and start eating up their ad budget. So we just want to keep an eye on them that they don't dive in those circumstances.
One thing related, I've had this experience several times where one ad will perform so well that we keep it running for the entirety of the pre-launch and the post-launch, and that's like the dominant ad by far. One time, the very first ad I ever created for a campaign was such an ad. I remember this was Die in the Dungeon with Wes Woodbury. Great dude, great company. The ad that we created was a beholder. If you're into RPGs, that's a pretty popular monster, and he created a very cool looking beholder, and we used that for ads. That ad by itself outperformed every other ad that we tested against it. And I remember Wes would ask me like, hey, we're running this ad. Is there anything else? Can we test other things? And we were testing different audiences on a regular basis, but the actual ad just kept outperforming every other ad that we would test. So we would just pause the other ad and then we'd think of a new one and or whatever it is. But the first ad just always outperformed. So it had like hundreds of people that likes, comments, shares, that kind of thing. And I thought it was funny, but Wes was always asking, hey, what can we do? Can we do this? Can we do that? And it was kind of a weird situation to keep running that ad constantly throughout the entirety of the campaign. And the important thing is that for our clients to understand, as far as managing their expectations, that if the same ad is running, it's not because we are not working, we're not, it's not because we're not managing it, we're not looking at it. It's because we actively look at it, we actively made changes, and we actually made a decision that this ad is the best performer, we're going to continue. So part of what I find that is the true value of a marketing professional is to know when you're on the right course and to not change course. Some clients tend to say, well, let's try a million things. And while that's not necessarily a bad mindset to have, it is a bad mindset if you have a very limited budget. And so if you're trying to extract as much as you possibly can out of a limited budget, you actually don't have the ability to make tons and tons of changes and tons of tests if you want to get actionable data. And Sean, like you were saying, if I change, three things, if I change the image, the headline, and the text in an ad, and then one outperforms the other, I actually don't really know why it's outperforming. It could be a better headline, but the image and the text from the first ad was better. And I could have, just with a few more days of tweaking, a few more days of A/B testing, I could have had a much better result because I know why I'm making these changes. I know why the first ad outperformed the second. I know why the third ad is outperforming both of them. And that really, to know why is a lot of why we do what we do as far as testing, isn't it?
Oh yeah. I think another thing that I've really learned was just the sheer popularity of board games. I always knew gaming was a huge part of Kickstarter, and I just knew games in general. It's a it's a $1 billion industry if you include video games. But the sheer number of independent board game developers and the frequency of which games are being developed and put out on Kickstarter, and recently there's an article released we'll include in the show notes of how tabletop games has basically broken a new record on Kickstarter in 2020, having seen a 34% increase in profitability on the platform. And you have sites like the GameFound, which is basically just dedicated to board games, tabletop games, crowdfunding. This industry doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and it seems to be growing. And that's not something I really understood before starting at Next Level Web. Because honestly, sometimes it feels like every week we're talking to a new game developer who's interested in what we do, and that's really exciting. I'm really glad to be part of helping this industry grow and develop, because I think board games are a very beneficial thing. I think it's a very family friendly, very beneficial way to enjoy people's company is with board games. I'm glad that this medium is growing.
That's actually something that's really surprised me as well, because even though, let's say I got into marketing board games, let's say over just, I would say 16 months ago now is when we started our first board game marketing project. I knew that it was something, first of all, I was a board game designer and a marketer, so I just kind of jumped in. I thought, well, I can combine these two passions and, that I in a new way and provide a service I feel like might be lacking in this industry. I was really shocked to see how the increase year over year has been for board game projects on Kickstarter. I was most shocked to find out that 70% of every board game campaign funded, or really it's 70% of tabletop game campaigns funded last year on Kickstarter. So not only did it raise $236 million for tabletop game campaigns, but 70% of the campaigns that ran actually funded. I hear a lot about Kickstarter's getting harder, it's getting tougher to get funded on Kickstarter and that sort of thing. But I'm just constantly amazed at the amount of campaigns that are actually funding. You have a great chance of funding a game on Kickstarter. And, for us, it's never been about just getting a game funded, but for me, it's all about the future of that company. If we were able to fund a game, at 500%, that means a whole lot more to distribution, to retailers, to others that would look at that campaign in the future. And of course, to that particular publisher that funded the game, they have more backers, a larger audience for their next Kickstarter, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I've really been shocked about how board games have been increasing at such a rate on Kickstarter, especially through the year of the coronavirus, where everybody, for a time was concerned that they might not have enough money to pay the bills and other things. It was a really weird time, but to see people spending money on Kickstarter to get a board game, 12 months later, it was pleasantly surprising. The coronavirus shut down every major convention, right? So no Origins, no Gen Con, no Essen. I mean, these are major conventions that retailers or that publishers show off their new products. And none of these people who are hardcore board gamers were able to attend these conventions, and they have money to spend, not only to attend the convention, the hotel room, and whatever, but they bring wads of cash to spend on board games, right? Or a credit card.
Yeah.
And so I find that, you may have a lot of people who would normally say, you know what, I don't back games on Kickstarter. I only back games, or I only buy games from the store because Kickstarter is less trustworthy than having a physical copy that I can just buy right there and exchange my money for it, have it. That type of mindset, there were no conventions to see all the new stuff. So you have this new kind of landscape, or this morphed landscape, where publishers are trying to adjust and change and market in a different way, reach the end consumer in a different way, because conventions are, the only conventions that I've been to in the last 6 months or 9 months are really 12. I guess my last convention was Gamma last year. So that was in March. So 10 months have been virtual. And that is quite a different animal to sell stuff and to let people know about what it is that you have going on. So I think that Kickstarter is maybe a beneficiary of that, because they've got people on that are more excited about deeper, crunchier hobby level games than than normal, that are just underserved, because they don't have conventions and things to see the new stuff.
Yeah. As well, geek is the new chic, right? I remember being in secondary school or high school, and it was like a Saturday, and I was like painting minis. And there was a friend from America who came over, and he was like a jock or like a sporty person. And like he kind of knocked on my door, and like I wasn't expecting company. So I was like in my pajamas, painting minis. And he was like, "What are you doing?" Like this world was completely foreign to him. Yeah. And he just thought I was like an alien, because why would you spend Saturday painting minis? I felt like such a nerd. I suppose I was. And I suppose being into nerdy things, into tech and stuff, these things are far more mainstream now. Board games, minis, even tech. Like most people, like everyone, before computers were just for geeks. Geeks used to tinker with computers. Yep. But now everyone carries a computer in their pocket. We call them phones, but they're actually computers. They've got motherboards, they've got processors. Yeah. They're just computers, and everyone uses computers now. I suppose the problem now with the tech is people are walking around with devices they actually don't really know how to control or how to use. Yeah. So there's a lot of exploitation that can happen. But apart from that, geek is the new chic, and I don't think this industry is going to slow down. In fact, I think we're going to see it continue to grow.
Yeah, I truly believe that this is like the golden age for board games right now. And I think COVID really, I hate to say this, but I think COVID really helped. We're in a generation where we pretty much want instant gratification. If we want a coffee, we're going to get in the drive-thru and get our coffee in 2 minutes and, get what we want. If we want a board game, we go to the store, we get our board game and come home. But with COVID, it's made a lot of things more difficult. For example, you can't go to your local board game and get the board game you want. So I'm like, okay, well, I can't get it. Let me go to Amazon. Well, then Amazon's backed up. We had, if you remember earlier last year, people were ordering stuff and they weren't getting it for like, up to a couple months later, because they're just so backlogged, because it was just, so many people were ordering. Our whole shipping industry just sort of like collapsed.
Yeah.
So then you go there and then you're like, well, if I can't get stuff now, let me look at other things that I might be able to get in the future. And I think, COVID has really changed how a lot of people look at getting things, where before, like I said, it used to be like instant gratification. I'm getting next day delivery or same day delivery. I'm getting my item now. I'm going to go order it and get it in 1 hour, to where it's like, oh, you know what? This looks really cool and I think I could wait for it. And I think that's really helped. Also, I was really worried when COVID hit that, since the economy's down, people weren't going to spend money on games. They're going to spend it, you stick to your basics. You pay your rent or your mortgage, you pay your food, you keep your family safe. And then, spending on things like games would just, plummet. But it's like the opposite has happened. I don't know what the stats are, but people have been spending way, way more money on board games and on Kickstarter this last year. Like I said, I think this is like the golden years of board games and Kickstarter.
I hear people say that, and I believe it. I agree with them. But I would go a step further and say that I don't think that we've reached the end of said golden age. I think that it's almost the beginning of the golden age. And I would say that, we can see that by, and I would say in certain areas. So board games, rather games as like an overall industry, you've got, the major players like Games Workshop with Warhammer. You've got Wizards of the Coast and Magic the Gathering and other things like that that really drive a lot. You also have, things like Hasbro with their mass market games like Monopoly and whatnot that sell like crazy. Certain elements of the industry, certain areas have kind of contracted a little bit, and other areas have expanded quite a lot. And Kickstarter represents like less than 5%. $236 million is like less than 5% of the total amount in the. In fact, I think it's like $4 billion. So it's a tiny, tiny fraction. It's between $2 and $4 billion. The games industry, tabletop games industry, and you've got RPGs and everything like that too. And that just it's all huge. Kickstarter in particular represents more than just a place to get like thicker, crunchier hobby board games. It actually represents a change to the normal means of distribution. So it represents a way to get to the end consumer that is kind of an industry disruptor. Before you would make a game, you would get it to a distributor, they would get it to retailers, and then people would buy it in a store. Well, that has, especially with COVID, that's quite impacted in the last year. Distribution has kind of always been a bottleneck because, somebody has a really great game idea, and distribution says, well, why would we buy 100 copies of your thing when we could just buy another 100 copies of Codenames because we know that's going to sell, right? Distribution has to sell 90% or more of what it is that they buy in order to even exist, right? So I think it's like 80% or more to just break even. And so that was always the challenge for newer people that were unproven in the marketplace, that it's easy now for, let's say, a company like Stonemaier Games. They are a proven asset. So obviously Wingspan was huge, Scythe is huge, Viticulture, and many of their other games are great. And so when Jamie Stegmaier comes out with a new product, distribution already knows about it. They've already planned for it and that kind of thing. But when, let's say, yours truly comes out with a very first game or whatever, it's like distribution will look and say, you are an unproven asset and we just kind of don't have time, or we don't, maybe we're not so willing to risk, rolling the dice on you, because we have other people and other games, other products that are proven assets that we know will sell. So why would we, risk when we have a guarantee? And so Kickstarter really kind of is changing the landscape of the board games industry in its own way by allowing another way for people that are passionate and people that have created great products to get to the end consumer. It entirely bypasses distribution. And while I do expect distribution to I kind of expect them to solve their problems and what they've got going on, their bottlenecks. There's only so much warehouse space, only so many products that they can market to retailers, and I do expect somehow that we're gonna see adaptation from them. But Kickstarter has been really instrumental in allowing many, many new people with great ideas to have an opportunity to show them to the world. And so that's why I think it's growing so much, is because it's majorly solving a problem. So I think that GameFound and Kickstarter, they are solving a problem that exists in a way that has not been addressed before. So I guess that's why I think Kickstarter is growing at such a rapid pace. And I do expect that Kickstarter will continue to grow. I'm not sure if, maybe the last year was like a huge banner year for Kickstarter and maybe it'll slow down, but I do expect to have double-digit positive growth this year as well. I have no idea if it's going to be, 30% more or whatever, but I do expect GameFound to cut into Kickstarter's sales. Overall, I do expect crowdfunding, maybe not just Kickstarter, but Kickstarter and GameFound overall are absolutely going to raise more than $236 million. I'd say we could look at, minimum 260 million for this year is what will be raised on Kickstarter.
So another thing that I've learned is the importance of a landing page. And this is the constraints of a landing page. Like a landing page, you cannot do anything except get information about a project and put your email in. The only thing you can do is hit back and go back to where you came from. There's nothing else there to distract someone. There isn't any. Those are the keys to a landing page, is to make it very clear that there's only one action that someone can do, is insert an email. And then off the back of that is the automation of those emails. And this is where MailChimp and learning MailChimp has been so helpful, is just setting up automations of emails through MailChimp, whether it's a welcome email that someone gets as soon as they join, to whether it's connecting your RSS feed. So when you post a blog or an update on your website, it's automatically just being emailed to your mailing list once a month. And you can speed up a lot of processes and sort of cut out a lot of work by just automating things. And we even developed a script for Facebook ads, because sometimes we start with we always start board games with the same ad set on different ad accounts, and just run a script that just does that for you. It saves time, saves energy, and you can do something else while that's working in the background. So yeah, just the power of automation in trying to optimize your time and your efforts is something that I'm continually trying to figure out. And I know, Andrew, we discussed even creating a course for people to just some of the things that we do. We want to share with people and give them like a step-by-step guide of this is exactly what we do and how we do it. And we might not have the time to sit down with people, but we could develop a course that could automate that for us and then help lots of other people basically do what we do.
I used to always say, my advice is always free. And in SEO marketing, you have less of a volume of clients. So you usually get to treat, clients with, you get more attention to clients and that kind of thing. And that's really what you do a lot of that. But in board games with Kickstarter stuff, there are so many people that need advice that our time would be filled with just, answering questions if we could. And so it just makes it a lot harder. Although I'll be happy to give free advice, it just gets harder to, for bandwidth purposes. I just don't have enough time in the day, right? So I really do like the idea of a course. Maybe for those listening right now, it would be awesome to hear what you would like from a board game course, what you would like to hear. I know we could probably talk about basics and whatnot, but what questions you'd like answered from a board game course, a marketing course.
This has been a great podcast. I really enjoyed listening to you, Sean, and what you do with us here at Next Level Web. It's always great because each of us that works for Next Level, we have different specialities, and we're almost like on our own. We do our own thing. So it's always great to hear from my fellow colleagues to see what they're doing in the internet marketing niche and how different or similar it is to what we do. We are out of time for this episode, but if you have a question or if there's something that you didn't hear from Sean today, feel free to visit our website at crowdfundingnerds.com/question, and we can send that question over to Sean. Also, as well, if you're interested in a Kickstarter marketing course for board games and you want to give us some input or have some questions, also visit that page as well and shoot us that question. For more information on this episode, as well as our other episodes, feel free to visit us at crowdfundingnerds.com. And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Catch you around.